Hello and welcome to the first edition of Fox Sports Lab NRL for the 2023 season. I'm Eloise Sohier, and with me are former NRL greats Josh Morris and Chris Lawrence, as well as stats guru Tim Williams. Coming up, our movers and shakers for the year ahead. Is Tom Trbojevic the key to Manly? And we'll give you our big tips for round one. There are 17 teams and a million questions to answer, starting, of course, with the big one, Josh Morris. Can Penrith make it 3 in a row?
I don't think they can. I think we've seen that St Helens has come over and beaten them already. I think the loss of Kikau and Coruscant are massive losses. They've lost Taylor May. We've seen players already sign with different clubs, so that creates a little bit of unharmony in the team. And I just think that it's been 40 years since a team's gone the three-peat. It is such a hard thing to do when you're constantly hunted. They did well last year to win 2 years in a row, but 3 years is a stretch, and I can't see them winning this year.
Tim, Penrith obviously are the favourites. Do you believe they are beatable, like Josh is saying?
Look, they're certainly beatable, and the odds are against them in terms of, as Josh said, 40-odd years since it's happened, since Parramatta in the early 80s. But I think what they have different to, like when we see how difficult it is for sides to go back-to-back, sides become victims of their own success, really. Players leave the club because they can get bigger money elsewhere. They become premiership players. Penrith's development systems and pathways, all out Western New South Wales, the blokes they bring through, Liam Martin, Matt Burton, Isaiah Yeo from out west in particular. But then in recent years, Taylor May comes through, Sonny Luke this season. He's got so much talent coming through, so I think they're uniquely positioned to potentially do the three-peat.
Obviously, there's so much focus on Penrith, Chris, coming into this season, given they are last year's premiers and they are going for that three-peat. But in across the league elsewhere in the NRL, who's recruited well, do you think, to make a charge up into the top 8?
Well, I think in terms of the two sides, everyone can agree that have recruited well. Obviously, a bit biased saying the Tigers and the Bulldogs, two teams at the bottom of the table that have recruited some really big signings, really senior players that are going to help not only their short-term success, but a lot of long-term success just by having a lot of the impact they're going to have training day in, day out. Some of the habits they're going to instill in the younger players and getting them out and away from the bottom of the table. But in terms of some of the, those teams that have recruited well, I think they are the two teams. Whether they can go on and win a competition is going to be hard. In terms of Penrith, it is going to be hard for them, but I think if they can go back-to-back over three-peat, we have to start looking at Nathan Cleary and say, where does he stand in some of the greats of our game, leading a Penrith side to 3 in a row?
Obviously, a big key to a team's success is staying injury-free. But if we look at some of the other clubs, including the likes of the Roosters, I know we've touched on them before, Josh, have they got the right experience in terms of games, players, age, to make the right combination to be there at the end come September?
I certainly think they've got the right mix of youth and age. You've got the experience of blokes like Jared Warrior-Hargraves, and then you've got the youth of someone like Joseph Suaalii. So you mix that in with Luke Keary, Joey Manu, Victor Radley, Brandon Smith coming on board. I definitely think that they've got the mix right, and if they stay injury-free, I certainly think that they're going to be in the grand final this year.
What about injuries? Of course, I touched on it just before, Tim. We know the Eels have been hit pretty hard before the season's even kicked off. Is that going to hurt them in terms of being, we know that they were in the grand final last year. Can they get there again this year in 2023?
Look, I think they can, and I look back to a few recent years, sides that have been knocked off in grand finals and that have come back the year later to win it. Penrith obviously did it quite recently for the first of their dual premierships, and then the Melbourne Storm did it a couple of years ago as well. So for those reasons, I think there's going to be, obviously, people are looking at fatigue, can they go back up? Are they good enough to do it? But I think there's going to be a lot of fire in the belly for the Parramatta Eels. They know how to get to a grand final. The experience that they will get from that grand final will go so far, particularly Mitch Moses and Dylan Brown in the halves there. So I think they can. And then you add Josh Hodgson, the experience he brings to that side. He might not be as good as Reid Marnie at the moment, but...
Do you think they have the depth to cover an injury to someone like Clint Gutherson or Mitch Moses or Dylan Brown, though?
In the halves is the big question, the name on everyone's lips. If one of them two goes down, it's Jacob Arthur. I think across the rest of the squad, we've already seen their back line, they're pretty well covered. Sorry, their back five, I should say, really well covered. They have decent depth in the forward pack, but I mean, we're going to find out in a week's time because they're obviously missing Sean Lane to start the season. There's Matt Dury, there's Jack Murchie, there are so many edge back rows. Bryce Cartwright has come back into the frame. We need to see if these guys can step up. They've got some big shoes to fill, but as I said, round one, we'll get a good gauge of it, but Sean Lane, Ryan Madison to come back in, the halves is going to be the issue. Big
shoes to fill, but I just want to end it off with saying a Smoky to make the top 8 or even the top 4, Chris.
I think a Smoky is going to be Manly, and I think it's all dependent on Tom Trbojevic. I think it's no secret he's one of the most influential players in the game. If he's fit and healthy, they are a genuine title contender, and I think without him, they potentially can make the 8, but it's going to be a really struggle.
Josh Morris, your premiership pick?
Roosters.
And Tim, lastly, Dally M winner for 2023?
Honestly, I think Tom Trbojevic, if he can stay fit this season, you look at the past winners of it in recent years, Nicho Hynes, Tom Trbojevic himself, Jack White and Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, 4 of the last 5 winners. They're in sides where there are not too many other guns in the side to steal points away from them. If Manly make a run and Tommy stays fit, he's pulling 2 to 3 points every win.
Looking forward to it. It'll be fascinating to see how this season plays out over the next 7 months.
League is life. It's exhilaration, anticipation, highs and highlights. League is everything. That's why we've made a betting brand for League fans. That's better. Gamble responsibly.